Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Enterprise Alchemy. I'm Ant.
And I'm Doug.
And today we are joined by Nathan Moore. Hey Nathan, how are you?
Oh, great, thanks.
Excellent. So
Having me, guys.
Today what we're going to be talking about, AI, virtual reality, how this has the potential to reshape at least some part of corporate learning and corporate training, and at least
can't wait. I'm so excited. I love it.
So I think this is going to be awesome. So Nathan, can we just dive into this straight away for our audience? I know you've been doing some pretty crazy stuff, and obviously we'll get into your background in a minute and what led you down this path. But I know you've done some groundbreaking work in critical care or intensive care situations in hospitals for training nurses in how to deal with patients and scenarios using virtual reality. Just tell us a bit about that, because I know when we first talked, I thought this is absolutely fascinating. This is something that needs to be showcased and highlighted. So just tell us a bit about that, where it came from, what you did, what the results you've seen, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One of the really important parts for me, as you mentioned, and we'll dive deeper further later, but background in education and healthcare. And so I've worked in traditional simulation-based learning for a long time. And simulation, we know, is an extremely powerful tool for bridging the gap between knowledge and practice. So helping people move beyond just remembering and understanding an idea, getting to that point of applying those principles. So we know that's really powerful, but one of the challenges with it is the accessibility piece. We were having to, whether it be in corporate or healthcare or whatever it is, you have to bring people to fixed time and locations to join together with skilled trainers, educators, clinicians, whatever it might be, to go through those processes. And whilst that's effective, we know it means that often people don't have access to that sort of training. And so I've been working a lot. My catalyst was working in advanced life support training, and I'll jump into some of that content a bit later. But what we had is we had clinicians coming to these courses. We'd want to talk about really vital interpersonal communication skills. And what would inevitably happen, you'd have really high-end people come together. We'd go through a scenario. We'd go into a debrief afterwards to unpack everything. And where we'd want to talk about leadership, followership, communication skills, we'd fall back on drug doses, rhythm interpretation, the basic learning that's part of the pre-reading, like fundamental concepts that they just hadn't engaged with because they weren't reading through the manual. So we thought, and right around this time, of 2019, we had the emergence of the first standalone VR headsets in the Oculus Quest. And we went, you know what? We can create immersive simulations, so VR-based, AI-enabled training scenarios that allow people to practice this in the time and place of their choosing. And that was the really key component for us, was that accessibility, asynchronous education, so that person can take it away, can use it when they need. But the really vital component, and I hope this comes out through our conversation, is me personally and us as Frameless Interactive are big believers of the right tool in the right place. And this isn't about just going, here's a shiny new technology that we can cram into all of your problems. This is about going, what are the problems you're seeing and what are the right tools we can use to address them? And in some instances, this will be VR or AI-enabled things, immersive simulation. Other times, it might be a flat-screen, mobile-based version of it for accessibility purposes. You may not need that level of immersion. Sometimes it won't be technology-based at all. But that's the real, when you're saying like our values, it's about helping people to be their best, using the right tools to get them there.
So, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. Is really thinking about how to draw people in and get them to engage with the materials, or get them to engage with whatever it is you're trying to teach them is kind of the first important step. So, how did VR play a role in that? In the health, in this sort of healthcare example and critical care, how did it do that, and how did it differ from what had come before it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think one of the real strengths for us, so VR as a technology isn't particularly new. There's been various iterations of it for decades now. For us, the high-level elements were you could create immersive environments for low-frequency, high-stakes events that could be engaged by the person when and where they wanted, allowing them to apply the principles we're wanting them to do.
Right.
They're sort of the key elements of why VR was an attractive prospect for this, that level of immersion. So with our ALS one, for example, what it allowed us to do was, what our ALS one allowed us to do was position the user at the foot of a patient's bed. There is a virtual team all around them, and they direct that virtual team in the management. It was about the decision-making processes. And for your listeners who may not know advanced life support training, it's a very regimented and algorithmic process. You're going to give adrenaline at this point. After the third shock, you'll give some amiodarone. There's certain reversible causes you're looking for. But what it allowed us to do was to randomize that situation. We built learning and analytics dashboards on the back end that record all the major KPIs. So the person was immersed in that environment. They had to direct their attention around a three-dimensional space, making decisions on how to manage that patient. And so when we rolled that out, in the beginning, this was a partnership between Frameless Interactive Western Sydney Local Health District and the University of Sydney, and it was a bit of a gambit. We were like, we think this could be really good. Because at the time, there wasn't a lot of people playing in the space, particularly in the standalone asynchronous piece, which was really important for us. We didn't want to create a situation you had to facilitate and organize a bunch of people to be together. It was that standalone, letting people practice when and where they want, how they want them. And so we took it to the International VRST conference. We won some awards, and District was like, you know what? This is really cool. And we were starting to see some really good feedback from the clinicians and from industry. And so it got us thinking about, well, what are other areas that these technologies could support? And the next big place we moved into was around violence and aggression minimization. So I know it is a global problem we have for our emergency departments. And, there's a critical incident in our hospital. One of my colleagues had a head split open by an aggressive patient, slammed her into a wall, and absolutely horrific incident. But it was sort of a catalyst when they went, we need to get in and do this. And so as an organization, they pulled together a really fantastic multidisciplinary team. They looked at what was currently happening. And, there was a multimodal approach. There was security people there, and informaticians to come up with electronic record solutions and all that. But we were tasked with looking at, well, how will our approaches to innovative education support the rollout of these changes? There was new drug policies, there was restraint, a whole bunch of different things. And so one of my good colleagues, Dr. Jennifer Davids, ran a large study looking at staff experiences. And long story short, we found that there were three key areas that we thought these technologies could support. And building back to that right tool in the right place idea, we had clinicians saying to us, one, they were not prepared the first time they saw the physical and chemical restraint of an aggressive patient. That was the first thing that came out. So what we did is we hired actors, we went down to the ED, and using 360 video, we filmed the physical and chemical restraint of an aggressive patient. We then put that into a VR headset, and that was one of the modules of this code like. And what it did is it meant it was a passive experience. The user's at the bedside, and they see this situation erupt around them. And it meant they could see what is absolutely a confronting and challenging experience, but they could see it in a virtual immersive environment before seeing it in the clinical setting. And to be honest, it was actually quite a simple process to do that. The technologies aren't hard to bring that together, but it was just extremely powerful because in that instance, I really do believe that was the right tool in the right place. The person is standing there, they're at the bedside, and they see it all going on. Really, really powerful stuff. We also filmed the pre-event preparation, so showing clinicians what we would expect them to do at the start of a shift and the post-event debriefing afterwards, as well as that gold standard. The next part was we were rolling out a new observation chart, which was all about early identification, because staff said they felt like it came out of nowhere. And when we deep dived into that, for a lot of the more novice staff, that coming out of nowhere was actually a lack of identifying the early signs of aggression. And so what it got us thinking about was, okay, how can we use these technologies to allow clinicians to rehearse this? So not to deep dive too much into the technology, but the way 360 video works is essentially you have a series of cameras pointing around the room. And what we did is we got 8 actors to position around the emergency department. We set up the camera in the nurse's station. We asked actors to perform scenes of early to late signs of aggression around the room, about 10 minutes each. In post-production, we then isolated each one of those lenses, sliced them into their own 1.5-minute vignette, then went through and graded each one of them with the new behaviors of concern chart, which was the tool we were training the clinicians in using. We then set up to when the user puts the headset on and clicks start, randomly selects 4 of those quadrants, stitches them together, and then what the user has is a randomized interactive 360-degree video. So they have 1.5 minutes that's different every time they do it to look around that emergency department and just observe all the patients and see what are the early signs of aggression. And so, you click on each patient, that patient's getting boisterous, that patient's starting to pace, whatever it might be. And that was the application of that tool. The third component, which is the part that really leads to where I think this conversation is going to go, and it was a real eye-opener for us, was staff said they just simply did not feel prepared to have the conversation, to actually talk with an aggressive patient or an aggressive family member. And what that got us thinking about was how we could leverage conversational AI to allow the training of interpersonal communication skills. So I was going to share a video. It seems like I'm having a few issues with just screen sharing at the moment, but I think you'll all be able to imagine what I'm talking about here anyway. What we did is we present the user with a patient or a family member, so they can do this in flat screen, on a mobile or in VR. They are positioned in the experience. There's a person standing in front of them. They can say whatever they want. They talk to the person. Hey, what's going on? You look really pissed off at the moment. What's happening? So first step was it was really important for us to have that allow for that productive failure. There are other places where people talk about, pre-scripts or you might click on this and they'll say that or whatever it is. For us, the first part was it was important it was their voice. We have such a diverse group of people that we're working with. It's really important that in this dialogue, they are creating the words themselves. So if the user says something, we then have speech-to-text interpretation. That text is then analyzed for intent. And so if it is determined, would this be inflammatory or would this be de-escalatory? So in this instance, it's all about verbal de-escalation. So the background emotions that we program against the AI is that of a frustration score, is a metric that we're using in this. So the idea being that frustration score, if they say the right things, they start to calm down. If they say the wrong things, they get increasingly aggressive. Well, that frustration score then maps to a series of body languages, and we use Unreal Metahumans. So very, very realistic looking avatars. So you get some of that emotion. You can see it in the language and the animation. Then what we have, the really novel component, is we use direct API access to, so we're currently using OpenAI. We can really switch that out for whichever large language model we want to use. But we then have direct access to it where we write a persona against the AI. So in the example I often use with people, it'll be, this guy's name's Louis. He's a good son. He cares about his dad. His dad hasn't been seen for a couple hours. The nurses are all incompetent. Only the doctor could fix your problem. So we write this backstory and persona. And what then happens is what the user says to the AI, it then comes back with an unscripted response based on the backstory and persona that we've given the AI to allow for that dialogue to occur. And so with that, to your original question, I know that was a roundabout way of saying why we made those choices, but what happened was it was really the evolution of us going, what's the gap we're seeing? What is either challenging to do in person or in role play? Or what are we actually just not able to do? And are these technologies, these emerging technologies, are they a way of potentially bridging some of those gaps and giving people opportunities that just otherwise weren't there? And I'll shut up for a second now and let you guys jump in.
No. I mean, and Doug is a huge fan of AI and ChatGPT, and he's always talking to me about it. But I think, to me, it's pretty mind-blowing. Like, and that's what I suppose I wanted to get to the audience is like, this is kind of the level of stuff that we're now getting to, right? And we'll talk, Nathan, in a little bit about how that's then, this might be used more broadly to help those interpersonal skills. But Nathan, can you give us what got you to that point? Like, give us a bit of your backstory. How did you come to be programming AI models to make family members of patients angry and doing de-escalation in critical care and all that? Like, how did you get here? Besides, I know, by the way, Nathan's a big fan of punk rock. I just want to put that in there.
Okay.
Sorry, mate, go on.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Look, man, back in the day, you might not tell, but I was a green-haired, spiky punk rock boy for a long time before it all fell out. Actually got my first
Now you
nursing
know
job.
why
I
it
had
fell
blue
out.
hair during my interview.
Hey.
Yeah, that's it. Possibly. No, look. So, I mean, where to begin? I think part of it is I actually genuinely feel like the majority of my life has led me to this for a variety of different reasons. I mean, I got into nursing. That was the grades I got in my FISA in Australia. It was UAI, your University Admission Index. I spent way too much time gaming during my HSC, and that was I wanted to do something in health, and that was something I could get into. However, I very quickly got that passion for nursing when I got into it. And so, as you mentioned at the beginning, I went into intensive care. One of the things in intensive care I loved was the focus you could place on a single person, on either single systems or the interactions and connection of all of those systems. Through growing up, and even a step before that, my dad's a carpenter. He's just a profoundly handy man, and my entire life before school, all of that was looking at how things work together and thinking about looking at how what actually makes stuff work and how we can fix things and look at ways of approaching things differently to get to whatever that is. Like it sort of was hardwired into me. And so, then intensive care has a big connection with technology as well. You're often using a lot of technologies to support a patient, to give their bodies time to heal. I then moved into after-hours education to sort of broaden my scope. And after a little while of doing that, one of the head doctors for the hospital said to my boss, "Hey, do you have anyone who's good at computers and knows advanced life support?" And they're like, "Oh, you should talk to Nate." And so what happened was we'd just gotten some funding from the government to set up a simulation service. And so myself and a good mate of mine, Dr. Andrew Coggins, who's now an exceptional emergency staff specialist, he and I started. So I was a little CNE, he was a registrar, and we kind of got together in this space and we looked at how we could actually tackle education in using these new technologies. And so we were literally helping run wires through roofs to put cameras in and just tinkering with how it all looked. And so that was really the start of my passion for education and actually giving people the time, so leveraging that simulation-based learning, which we know is so powerful. Fast forward, while I was heavily involved in that, we did lots of systems testing, device integration, again, looking at how people and places and technology all intersect through an educational lens. I did my Masters of Adult Education, really, really deep dive down that stuff. But then around 2019, as I described with the ALS stuff, we wanted to find, well, how can we take this to the next level? And this is where we started exploring VR. The University of Sydney, as I mentioned, we partnered up with, they sort of twisted my arm a bit and said, you should probably do a PhD around this because you're going to be doing some really great research. So I reluctantly agreed. Looks like I've just submitted my thesis for review. So hopefully I'll be done and dusted with that in the very near future.
So you'll be Dr. Nathan.
Yeah. That's I joke with my team. They hired a nurse and they get a doctor. But yeah, so it's sort of been that evolution and just looking at, like I say, from the beginning, it was always what's the right tool in the right place and really leaning into that ethos and just trying to stay on top. Because I think one of my last roles in the district before I stepped out, so the district, as I mentioned, they made the lead for digital innovation role. I did that for a while. And then for my own professional development, we had our inaugural Chief Nursing Information Officer role came up in the district, and I had a few people suggest I'd be a great fit for that. So working with the IT department, and I knew my direct manager at the time, the leader of that, Christina Agartha, is a visionary leader. She's unbelievable, and I really wanted to work with her and get more of an insight into, we were deploying these solutions into complex IT systems, but I'd come from this primarily from an education innovation research perspective. So I wanted to get some of that exposure. So I joined the team there and I did that for quite a while. I became a fellow of the Australian Institute of Digital Health. So then I was starting to look at, well, what are the infrastructure requirements? And, part of my research was how do you actually deploy this stuff? How do we physically, what are working with IT departments for firewall and proxy settings? We, worked with the infection control team at a state level to come up with the cleaning and disinfection, so the state guidelines for the cleaning and disinfection of head-mounted displays so we could use it in healthcare. So it was really looking at what is the bigger picture stuff, not just going, this is shiny, but how do we actually get it in the hands of the people who need it? And so, yeah, working through as the Chief Nursing Information Officer, worked closely with the Australian Institute of Digital Health, became a fellow in there. And then about 12 months ago, Frameless, they approached me and they said, hey, we think we're really onto something here with the stuff I've been building with you. We think we can take LearnSuite Health, which is our aggregation of all the apps I've been talking about, and a whole bunch more. We think we can take this to market and really make something of it. So then I stepped out of the district and we've co-founded Frameless, and that's sort of how I got here today. Done some, did the Australian Clinical Entrepreneur Program on the way. So looking at that transition between like intrapreneur and entrepreneur, so how you drive change with it internally and then stepping out. But it's been a fantastic journey, and I'm still working it out as we go, but learning a heck of a lot. It's been really great.
What's this business going to look like when it's finished?
Yeah, well, I mean, that is a very interesting question, because we are going through a little bit of an evolution at the moment, which I must say Anthony alluded to earlier, because when this started 6 months ago, the vision was LearnSuite Health is an aggregation of healthcare training applications that support, the verbal de-escalation, advanced life support. We have clinical handover solutions that do real-time assessment of how you communicate with one another, looking at that transmission of information. We have mindfulness and well-being. We have some really interesting stuff we want to do around patient interactions, identification, documentation, escalation of deterioration. And so as a business, we're like, this is, we're going to be a healthcare training company. Now, what we've seen is obviously, like all startups, we're finding that, the market in Australia at the moment is a bit challenging around funding and things like that. So our real passion is this healthcare support, but we've also realized from a scalability perspective, there's really something in this AI-driven conversational agents for interpersonal communication skills. And so at the moment, we're working with, so we will always have LearnSuite Health, and because our passion, our ethos is helping improve patient outcomes and helping better train clinicians. But we're also looking at the business as another product line, for want of a better word, is working with corporates in other verticals where the training of interpersonal communication skills is valuable, building content for, interacting with customers who are upset. We talk to some people about airline, looking at some coaching and leadership skills. So where these interpersonal communication skills are essential, looking at leveraging our tools to work in those different verticals.
I'm loving what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I just before we go on to that, because that's a whole nother piece, right? Because to unpack that, I can see, from all the conversations I have, I think that thing is huge. So, but Nathan, as I understand, just on the healthcare side of things, you're now going around the world and kind of talking to, because I think you were here, right? Talking to the NHS and or just giving keynotes and things like that, and opening people's eyes to this. So from the sort of global healthcare perspective, what are you seeing? Is this something that people are saying, actually, this is a very good use of this type of tech? Like, what's the sort of feedback you're getting in the healthcare world?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've got to say, the thing I'm probably loving the most in being this space is how open people are to talk about all of this. Like it is a little bit of the wild frontier at the moment. Like, yes, there's been people playing in the space, but we're all, the technology is all evolving in such a rapid space that we're all everyone's looking at we all bring a slightly different lens to it, I think. And so there are plenty of players. As you mentioned, I was invited by the Technology Enhanced Learning team to present at the Giant Conference in London, end of 22. That was fantastic. And, the NHS is doing some amazing stuff over there, supporting their different trusts with some of these technologies. They have packs that they will send out. If you want to do 360 video filming orientation, they will send the packs with the software. They have the infrastructure set up to help you deploy that. Like that is amazing. And it just, they've got it equipped, and they're doubling down on that stuff. I was in LA for virtual medicine with Brennan, and they're doing amazing things out of Cedars-Sinai in the clinical space. It's actually looking at the idea of digital therapeutics and the stuff around mental health and distraction techniques and pain reduction through the use of these immersive technologies. There's some unbelievable, like just mind-blowing things about one of my real passions is gamification for behavioral change. And there's been some really interesting studies around mobilization willingness in elderly patients. So looking at when they're doing traditional physiotherapy, what they're willing to do, then you put them in a headset, give them a butterfly net, and get them walking around catching butterflies in the room and watching how much more willing they are to move and mobilize. Perceptual deceptions of changing how the position for range of motion and making it look like your arm isn't rotating as far as it is. And so they might have a range of motion out to here, put them in a headset, make it look like their arms only moved slightly less, but in reality, it's gone to a greater extent. Like there's so many emerging use cases for these things, like even just outside of the training that we've been talking about. But on that side, there's a bunch of people doing some really interesting stuff, looking at collaborative learning environments, looking at surgical skills training, procedural stuff, the intersection. One challenge I've seen with particularly the VR side, so not AI here, is what we call haptics, so that the idea of the touch. As you can imagine, there's a lot of healthcare training that's very dependent on the touch side of things. And it's something people are working with gloves and all sorts of things. They're just not quite there. And not everyone, but a lot of the people in the space would agree. And so it's something that's emerging, but I think there's a real space when that gets there. But there's some really great use cases for those low frequency, high stakes events. They're training people on different surgical procedures they may just have not seen before. They need to rehearse this before they do it in real life. I think one of the really big ones at the moment in the XR space is where we're getting to with mixed reality and augmented reality. So actually not just recreating that entire environment, but giving you that sort of heads-up display to the world approach where you have digital overlays of real-world items that can integrate. So I think those spaces are really exciting. And there's lots of traction, lots of investment going on. But lots of nuance in the way that people are approaching these things.
So what this, in for me, Doug, right, is that and the reason I'm, asking about the healthcare stuff, right, and like you said, Nathan, there, low frequency, high stakes events, right? So if you can get it right to work in something like that, even though, there can be, sometimes if you're having like on the corporate side, communication issues or conflict or, having those conversations,
closing deals,
right? It's not as high stakes as, well, if you get this wrong, somebody dies, right? So what I'm so interested in, Nathan, is you've proven it, and there's a lot, as you said, there's loads of stuff happening. How does this then translate? I know you said you're seeing sort of broader application, and when we first spoke, this is where I saw there might be, and I'm curious, everybody's talking about AI and, you know what I mean, how to train Chat GPT and do all this sort of stuff. And here's the prompts that make your life easier and whatnot. But this conversational AI, right, to my mind, and especially if it was twinned with VR, but even if it's not, if you can talk to it and it talks back and you're building personalities, that goes a long, long way beyond just putting a prompt into Chat GPT, right? How do you see that? And, now we're talking future stuff. And I know you guys are very young as a business because you're on the absolute bleeding edge of this stuff, which is obviously why I wanted to bring it to the viewers and to the audience of saying, look at the crazy stuff that's coming down the pike here. What are the main areas that you see application in the corporate world? Stuff that our listeners might be able to relate to, or viewers as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, at the highest level, and again, like you say, this particular piece is still something we have working proof of concepts going. We are testing this stuff actively, but it is still emerging in our mind exactly how it's all going to. And for us, it's about creating the opportunity for anyone to create the role plays that are essential for them. And that's sort of the part we're really leaning into, is how you replace the role play. We've all been in those situations where they buddy you up with someone and go, okay, you close to that, or, you pretend you're annoyed about something. And the idea for us is to take that and not only allow, part of it is about allowing for that rehearsal, for that role play, but the other part is the fact for more senior people, and as we start talking to managers and people who may have I remember being a student. If I looked like the fool in a session, I didn't care. It's expected of me. I'm the student. That's fine. I never worried about that too much. But as you get more senior and there's expectations on you that, you will perform at a high standard, when you go into these group exercises and all of a sudden you're the manager or you're the executive and you're expected to have these conversations, that can be a lot on show for a role play if you don't do it well. And there can be a lot on your shoulders. So we know I've worked with all levels of organizations for many, many, many years. And, that is a real concern for some people. So part of this idea of the asynchronous, just practice when and where you want, so you're better equipped when it's required. So that's at the highest level is going, okay, what are the role plays we need to do? What are the things I need to rehearse? What are the things that are coming up that I'd love to have run through a few times, and rather than doing it with my partner in the kitchen the day before I go into the office and the meeting happens, I've got something that's going to be a bit more engaging, that's going to give me more randomization. It can come back slightly different ways. You can rehearse that.
Right. So this is the piece I wanted to pick up on, Doug, because, and I'm sure we've all been there, right, with training and role plays and that kind of stuff. And the thing that always struck me, especially not necessarily when I was I wasn't the person trying to sell, but the person on the other side, is I'm like, oh, I don't know how to respond. Like, what should I do? Should I get? And then I feel all weird and it gets all stunted. And then you're like, oh, this sucks. I'm just not that keen on this. I really, feel a bit strange. So is what you're saying, Nathan, that it creates sort of a safe space almost? And that sort of twins in with, the concept of psychological safety, I think, and saying, here's a place that you can do. So one, it's the safe space, but two, it sounds like, as you said, through randomization, it's more realistic.
Yeah, absolutely. And mate, I'm so glad you said psychological safety. And I don't know how much you've had in healthcare, Tim, but that is like an underlying tenet for everything we do, is that this is a safe space for you. The debriefing, this is about creating somewhere. And again, not everyone does it well, but the idea is to create that psychological safety so someone can be open enough to have these conversations and really explore these things. One thing that I hadn't mentioned yet, that's also part of it when you're saying linked with VR, the other thing we're looking at as well is how you see yourself from somebody else's shoes. So in these conversations where you've got more of a transactional interaction, and so one of the use cases we're exploring in the healthcare setting is breaking bad news. Tell Mrs. Johnson her husband's just passed away. You're in a headset, Mrs. Johnson's position in front of you. You have that interaction, then you push a button and you're in Mrs. Johnson's shoes looking back at yourself, and you see an analog of yourself with your own voice saying exactly what you just said. So you can see how you present yourself.
That's unbelievable. Believable, but it's just so valuable. Going to the corporate world, because a lot of our listeners and viewers are from the corporate world. Nathan, you know about psychometrics, obviously, and a lot of companies leave money on the table because they don't have a high enough level of literacy of psychometrics in their businesses. A lot of our work is around making sure that isn't a challenge for their company, that they understand that everybody behaves differently, and some people, for them, their fears are safety or change or security, and other people, when you speak to them, they just don't want waffle. They just want to talk about the solution and let's get there now, and it's about the bottom line. And then you get the people that all attention to detail, and you can take a long time when you're selling to them because they're wanting to soak up that information. So it's about teaching people to recognize what's in front of them and then react accordingly, and you've got a better chance of closing deals.
Well, servicing customers, closing deals, communicating with your team,
resolving conflict.
Right, resolving. I can see so many applications for this, and because of it's more realistic. But Nathan, we're getting close on time now, so one of the things I would like to, just a question to go out, right? Because obviously a lot of the podcasts we do is people talking about the here and now, and we generally close out with those action items. But given that this one's a little more kind of future oriented, right, and on the bleeding edge, if you could imagine any sort of scenario in that corporate world that you're enabling for someone, like without necessarily, knowing what you know roughly about the constraints. So not something insane that's like a decade or more away, but let's call it the near future. Like, what would that solution look like to you? What would it help people to do? And I just like, in closing out, just get a bit of your imagination, right? Because I know you've clearly gone way down the rabbit hole on this thing and done heaps of crazy stuff. So like, where does your imagination take you next?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, I would probably say with two things. First part is, I know you're saying this is a bleeding edge and futurist stuff. The reality it is actually here, and we are doing this, and we absolutely can do it. It is just about creating the content with the right partners. Like that's honest to God where we're at the moment. But where we get to, for me, it all comes down to difficult conversations. It comes down to things that anyone, even in the corporate setting, have challenges with interacting with. So I've got visions of senior leaders having town halls where different people are coming to them because there's been a major incident, and they need to respond to each one of those people one by one as they come to the microphone. I'm picturing managers rehearsing incidents, rehearsing with interactions they know they're about to have on underperforming staff members. They don't want to come back to the office. Excessive sick, whatever it might be. Going, I know this is going to be a challenging conversation. I want to rehearse this. But it all comes down to, what are the difficult interpersonal communication skills, the difficult conversations that we're going to be having? Every single descriptive thing you guys were just talking about then, from closing deals, staff conflict, they're all, and I don't mean to simplify it, but they are all just personas. This is about allowing someone in real time to pick the right tools they want to apply in this setting, to approach it in the right way, exactly as you described, the different motivators, personas, rationales for how people make their decisions, identifying that and responding accordingly. That's where we will get to. That's what we're trying to do here, is just give people the opportunity to rehearse this difficult conversations when and where they want, how they want.
So the question, people like us, we're going to spend time with the corporate sales teams and corporate executives, and we do the dummy role with them, because I can play the different types of personas that need to, and that sort of coaching, is that going to be gone? Is AI taking over?
I think, and this is, so we've had the same conversations in the healthcare space. And again, you talk to different people in this, and some people say, yes, we will remove the need to have people. What my view is, that's not the case. These are supplemental assets. These allow, because your time is valuable. I know that me role-playing with you is going to be a valuable exercise for me. However, it's time constraints to me and you for the time we have there. What these technologies mean is I can rehearse these things. You can have a classroom of 20 people role-playing with their own personalized AIs with the personas that are required. And then, yes, maybe after that half an hour of practice, or they practice for an hour before they come to the course, then we go down and you give me the nuanced feedback from that you as a skilled facilitator can do.
Okay.
These are supplemental assets to make your time more valuable. It's about opening doors to additional opportunities.
So, Nathan, just final question, I think, here before I wrap up. With the frameless stuff, and I'm, thinking about our audience out here who might be thinking, actually, this is something that I'd be interested to partner, right, with them, or, and contribute to this, and, to be at the forefront. Are you at the stage now where you're sort of accepting or open to other partners and corporates and things like that, coming to you and using this kind of breakthrough tech?
Absolutely. 100%.
Got some great ideas for you. I'll chat to you afterwards.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I think that's about all we've got time for this particular episode. Nathan, I can't thank you enough, mate, for taking the time to share your wisdom and expertise in this area. Guys out there in the audience, as always, I'm Ant.
And I'm Doug.
And this has been Enterprise Alchemy, and we will see you on the next episode. Cool.